The fire started before Clara Vale had spent a single night in the inheritance her brothers had called worthless. She was standing beneath the broken arch of Blackthorn Manor, holding the rusted key her father had left her, when flames rose in a straight red line through the dead orchard behind the house. The trees had not borne fruit in 17 years. Their branches were gray, split, and empty. Yet someone had soaked the grass between them with lamp oil and lit it from 3 different points. Clara ran toward the blaze until a chain snapped tight across the front gate behind her. On the other side of the iron bars, a man in a dark coat pulled the chain through the lock and disappeared into the smoke. Then, the ground beneath Clara's boots trembled. From somewhere under the ruined kitchen came the roar of water, deep and violent, as if a river had been buried under the house and had just awakened. She had inherited no money, no livestock, and no part of the prosperous Vale farms. Her brothers had received all of that before the soil on their father's grave was dry. Clara had received a roofless manor, a dead orchard, and 21 days before the county tore both down. But as the flames moved closer and the stones beneath her feet began to sweat clear water, she understood that Blackthorn Manor was not the useless ruin everyone had described. Someone was terrified of what it still knew. 3 days earlier, the Vale family had gathered in the dining room at Ashcombe Farm to hear the last will of Elias Vale. Rain rattled against the windows. The clocks had all been stopped at the hour of his death, though no one had asked Clara whether she wanted them stopped. Her elder brother, Adrian, sat at the head of the table in their father's chair, one hand resting on the carved arm as if possession had already passed through the wood. Matthew, 2 years younger than Adrian and 5 years older than Clara, stood by the fireplace with a glass of brandy he had begun drinking before noon. Their wives sat beside them in new mourning silk. Clara wore the same black wool dress she had worn while nursing her father through the last winter. The cuffs had been mended twice. There was still a faint stain of medicine near one wrist. Mr. Harlan Penn, the family solicitor, opened the will with a paper knife and read in a voice careful enough to survive anger. Adrian received Ashcombe Farm, its eastern fields, the grain contracts, and the larger share of the cattle. Matthew received the mill property, the river meadow, 2 tenant cottages, and the family accounts held in the county bank. Clara listened without moving. She had expected little. For 7 years, she had kept the farm ledgers, managed household purchases, sat beside sick beds, and written every letter their father could no longer hold a pen to write. Yet, in the Vale family, work done by a daughter was often treated like whether useful, constant, and belonging to no one. Mr. Penn paused before the final paragraph. Adrian leaned back. Matthew smiled into his glass. To my daughter, Clara Ann Vale. Mr. Penn read, I leave Blackthorn Manor, the orchard known as the Winter Ground, the surrounding wall, the western lane, and all rights, fixtures, bourdons, channels, and covenants attached thereto. I also leave the brass key held in the sealed envelope marked with her name. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Matthew laughed. It was not a startled laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had been waiting for permission. Blackthorn, he said. Father left her Blackthorn. Adrian's wife covered her mouth, though not quickly enough to hide her smile. Clara looked at Mr. Penn. She had seen Blackthorn Manor only from a distance, a dark shape beyond the northern ridge. Every child in the district knew its story. The orchard had died in one winter. The wells had turned bitter, and the family who lived there had abandoned the house before spring. Since then, the roof had fallen in. The gardens had become a wilderness, and villagers used the western lane only when the main road flooded. Adrian folded his hands. You should know. Clara, that the county has condemned the structure. The notice arrived last month. Demolition is scheduled 3 weeks from tomorrow. Matthew added. The land is no better. Thin soil. Dead roots. No road worth using. The stone might fetch enough to pay the demolition fee. If the walls do not fall before then, Mr. Penn removed an envelope from his case. It bore Clara's name in her father's handwriting. Inside lay a brass key, blackened by age, and a single line written on a torn strip of ledger paper. Do not let them break the kitchen floor. Clara read it twice. When she lifted her eyes, Adrian was watching the paper rather than her face. What did father leave you there? He asked. Nothing that belongs to you, Clara said. Matthew lowered his glass. Adrian's expression did not move. But the fingers on the chair arm tightened. Their father had been buried that morning. Clara had watched both brothers stand beside the grave with lowered heads, each measuring grief against the land he expected to receive. Now, for the first time, she saw something beneath their confidence. Not disappointment. Fear. Adrian rose and walked around the table. Blackthorn is dangerous, he said in the mild tone he used when issuing orders he wished to disguise as concern. Stay here until the demolition. We will arrange something suitable afterward. A room with Matthew's housekeeper. Perhaps. Or a position with one of our tenants. Clara folded the note and put it inside her sleeve. I will go today. In this rain, Matthew said, there is no whole roof. There is no bed. There may not be a floor. Then I will learn which parts remain. Clara replied. Adrian's patience cracked only at the edges. You have no money to repair it. The will leaves the estate accounts to us. You cannot hire men. You cannot purchase timber. You cannot even prove the lane is passable. Clara stood. I can prove whether a key opens a door. Mr. Penn looked down at the will, as if there were words he wished he could add. When Clara passed him, he quietly said, Miss Vale. The phrase rights, channels, and covenants was included by your father against my advice. I asked him to explain it. He would not. Clara stopped. Did my brothers know it was there, Mr.? Penn's eyes moved once toward Adrian. They knew the wording, he said. I cannot say they understood it. Adrian called her name from behind. Clara took her coat from the peg, lifted the small carpet bag she had packed before the funeral, and left Ashcombe Farm without turning around. The western lane began beyond the last cattle field and climbed through hedges so high they shut out the farms on either side. Rain had washed deep grooves through the ruts. Clara walked because no carriage had been offered and because she would not ask. By the time she reached the ridge, mud had soaked through one boot and the handle of her carpet bag had cut a red line into her palm. Blackthorn Manor stood below her in a bowl of land surrounded by low hills. From a distance, it looked less like a house than the blackened ribs of a ship. The central block still held its roof, but the eastern wing was open to the sky. Ivy covered the stone up to the second floor. Tall chimneys leaned at angles that made the eye uneasy. Behind the manor stretched the winter ground, 6 acres of dead fruit trees planted in precise rows. Their branches interlaced over grass, gone silver with neglect. Yet even in ruin, the place possessed order. The orchard rows aligned with the windows. Narrow stone channels ran between the trees. At the far end stood a circular brick structure, half hidden by bramble, like an old well house. Clara reached the gate near dusk. The brass key did not fit its lock. She climbed over where the wall had fallen. The front door was missing, but the key turned smoothly in a smaller door beneath the west stair. That door opened into a service passage lined with blue and white tiles. Dust lay thick across the floor except for one clean mark near the wall. The print of a recent boot. Clara set down her bag. Someone had entered after the last rain. She followed the passage into a kitchen larger than the dining room at Ashcombe. Half the ceiling had collapsed. A long preparation table lay on its side beneath plaster and broken lath. The great iron range was rusted shut. Across the center of the flagstone floor ran a line of square brass studs, each stamped with a number, 1 through 12. The seventh stud was polished. Not clean, but polished by touch. Clara knelt and pressed it. Nothing happened. She searched the walls until she found a narrow keyhole hidden beneath the lip of a stone shelf. The brass key fit. When she turned it, a mechanism clicked somewhere under the floor, and the seventh stud rose a finger's width. Clara gripped it and pulled. A rectangular stone panel lifted on concealed hinges, releasing a breath of air cold enough to make her gasp. Beneath the panel, stone steps descended into darkness. She had no lamp yet. She closed it again. Outside, evening settled over the dead orchard. Clara found a dry room beneath the west stair, made a bed from her coat and 2 old curtains, and ate the bread she had brought from Ashcombe. She did not light a fire. The kitchen note remained tucked inside her sleeve. Do not let them break the kitchen floor. Near midnight, she woke to the smell of smoke. The first flames were already moving through the orchard. She ran out, saw the chained gate, and heard the buried water. The roar rose beneath the kitchen, traveled under the walls, and answered the fire with a sound like thunder. Clara seized an iron hook from the passage, climbed the low wall beside the gate, and dropped into the lane. The man who had locked the chain was gone. She ran to the nearest farm, a mile west, and beat on the door until Jonah Pike opened it, carrying a lamp and a wood axe. Jonah had once tended the county canal gates, before an accident took 2 fingers from his left hand. He was a broad, quiet man of 35 who rented 3 poor fields and spoke only when silence had stopped being useful. Clara told him the orchard was burning. He looked past her toward the red glow on the ridge and woke his hired men. They brought wet sacks, shovels, and a cart barrel. By Dan. The fire had been beaten into black strips between the rows. Most of the trees had already been dead, but the flames had split their bark and scorched the old channels. Jonah stood beside Clara near the kitchen wall, studying the water seeping between 2 foundation stones. That did not come from rain, he said. The ground is dry below 6 inches. Clara looked toward the circular brick house at the far end of the orchard. There was water under the kitchen, she said. I heard it moving. Jonah touched the seep with his fingers and tasted 1 drop. Sweet, he said. Not well water. Spring water. Behind them, wagon wheels sounded on the western lane. Adrian arrived with Matthew, 2 county constables, and a man carrying a leather document case. Adrian stepped down before the wagon had fully stopped. He looked at the burned orchard, then at the broken chain on the gate, and finally at Clara. You could have died, he said. Someone locked me inside. Matthew snorted. The chain is old. It may have fallen. Chains do not pass themselves through padlocks, Clara replied. The man with the document case introduced himself as Mr. Bell from the county works office. He unfolded a notice and nailed it to the gatepost. By authority of the county, he said, Blackthorn Manor is declared structurally unsafe. No person may reside within the main building. Demolition will begin in 21 days. Clara read the notice. The application date was 6 weeks earlier, when her father had still been alive. Applicant Adrian Vale. Executor, in anticipation. She looked at her brother. You filed to destroy my inheritance before it was mine. Adrian's face remained calm. Father was dying. The building is dangerous. I acted for the family. You acted before the will was read. I knew what was in the will. You knew enough to be frightened of the floor. Clara thought, but did not say. Jonah took the notice from her and studied the seal. County demolition requires a survey, he said. Where is the survey, mister? Bell stiffened. Filed with the office. conducted by whom Adrian answered before Bell could. A qualified man. Jonah gave him a flat look. A qualified man who never walked the western lane. There has been no survey stake here. And no wheel track before today. Matthew stepped forward. This is not your concern. Pike. Jonah looked at the burned orchard. A locked gate and 3 lines of oil make it my concern. Adrian turned back to Clara. Leave with us now. We will not ask again. Clara folded the demolition notice along its existing crease. No, she said. Adrian's gaze hardened. Then you have 21 days to learn why father should never have filled your head with stubborn ideas. He climbed into the wagon. Matthew followed. But not before glancing toward the kitchen windows. The look lasted only a second. It was enough. After they left, Jonah walked with Clara through the scorched rows. At the base of the 7th tree in the 7th row, the blackened bark had split. Beneath it showed a narrow line of living green. Clara crouched beside the tree and touched the green tissue with the edge of one fingernail. The wood was damp, not with rain, but with sap. Jonah cut a shallow line lower on the trunk. A clear bead formed and held. Dead trees do not bleed, he said. This one has been starved. Clara looked down the row. The orchard channels, almost hidden under moss and ash, converged toward Blackthorn Manor. Her father had called the property the winter ground in the will. The old people of the county claimed fruit had once been harvested there when every other orchard stood bare. Everyone had treated that as a fireside exaggeration. Now, Clara saw small iron grates at the root line of every 7th tree. They were clogged with soil. She and Jonah cleared one with their hands. Beneath it lay a narrow clay pipe. Jonah struck it lightly with the iron hook. A hollow note answered. There are miles of these, he said. Perhaps more. Clara remembered the roar under the kitchen. Can water keep roots alive for 17 years without reaching them? It can keep them from dying. Jonah said. That is not the same as letting them live. He left after sunrise to return the borrowed barrel and came back near noon with a shovel, a coil of rope, 2 lanterns, and a loaf wrapped in cloth. He did not offer the items as charity. He said the county still owed him for 3 months of gate work, and he intended to collect part of the debt by interfering with bad decisions. Clara accepted that explanation because it allowed them both to keep their pride. Together they entered the kitchen cellar. The steps descended 12 feet to a brick chamber beneath the central house. The ceiling was arched. Copper pipes ran along both walls, green with age. On the floor lay a shallow stone basin, dry except for a thread of clear water entering through a crack. A brass wheel was fixed to the far wall. Above it, someone had painted 12 white marks, matching the studs in the kitchen floor. The 7th mark had been scratched nearly away. Clara turned the wheel. It resisted, then moved a fraction. Somewhere beyond the wall, metal struck metal. The thin thread of water stopped. Jonah raised his lantern. That is no cellar, he said. It is a gate chamber. He examined the pipes and found tiny letters stamped into their collars W, N, M, V, Westfield, North Slope, Mill Run, Village. Clara guessed. Jonah nodded. The wheel controls something larger. But the main mechanism is behind this wall. They searched until dusk. In an alcove behind fallen shelves, Clara found an iron plate bearing the outline of a tree with roots shaped like rivers. Under the image was a sentence in Latin. She could not translate all of it, but recognized aqua, communi, and custodia. Water, common, guardianship. Jonah rubbed dirt from the lower corner. There had been a second plate bolted beneath it. Only 4 empty holes remained. Someone had removed it. The next morning, Clara went to the village for lamp oil, nails, and food. Blackthorn's fire had traveled faster than she had. People in the market square turned toward her, watchful. The drought had lasted 3 summers. 2 public wells now produced only muddy water. A fever had spread through the southern cottages the previous August. Adrian had paid for barrels to be brought from the river and was praised for generosity, though he charged each household after the second delivery. At the grocer's, Clara heard 2 women whisper that the strange water under Blackthorn was likely poisoned. At the smithy, a man said the manor should be brought down before it contaminated the valley. None of them knew there was water beneath it. Someone had told them within hours. Matthew stood outside the tavern when Clara came out with her purchases. He leaned against the wall, smiling as though their meeting were accidental. "You are making people nervous," he said. "By buying nails, by opening things Father intended to remain closed." Clara shifted the parcel under her arm. "You told me the property was worthless. Worthless things can still be dangerous." He stepped closer. "The orchard killed itself once. Let it stay dead. Orchards do not light their own grass," she said. His smile disappeared. He reached for her wrist, then stopped when Jonah emerged from the smithy carrying a repaired crowbar. Matthew lowered his hand. "Pike," he said. "Still, attaching yourself to lost causes," Jonah answered. "Some causes are only called lost by men who need them buried." Matthew walked away without another word. Clara and Jonah returned by the western lane. Halfway up the ridge, Jonah told her he had served under Elias Vale when the county still maintained the northern canal. Her father had sat on the water board for 12 years. He knew every spring, culvert, and drainage cut from the hills to the river. "Why did he never tell me?" Clara asked. Jonah looked toward Blackthorn. "Perhaps he told you in the only way he believed your brothers could not intercept." That evening, they began clearing the west rooms. Clara needed one safe chamber before the county inspectors returned. She chose the old library because its ceiling remained whole. Hundreds of books had been removed, but their pale shapes were still visible on the shelves. Behind the last shelf, she found lines penciled directly onto the plaster. They were heights and dates, beginning 42 years earlier. Beside each date was a number followed by the word flow. The numbers declined gradually, then plunged 17 years ago. On the final line, her father had written, "Gate closed by family vote. Temporary measure. Must be reversed." Beneath it, in darker pencil added much later, "I did not reverse it." Clara sat on the dusty floor. Her father had known. Whatever had killed the orchard had not been accident or disease. It had been a decision. Jonah found a rolled map inside the hollow back of a desk drawer. Most of the ink had faded, but the map showed the valley in cross-section. Blackthorn Manor sat above a web of subterranean channels, fed by a spring beneath the northern ridge. One branch ran toward the Vale Farms. Another curved beneath the village. A third crossed the mill meadow. Near the center, beneath the manor, a star-shaped device controlled all 3. Across the bottom, someone had written in Elias's hand, "The house is not built over the water. The house is built around the choice." Clara thought of the will rights, fixtures, boardings, channels, and covenant. "Why leave this to me?" she asked. Jonah did not answer. The answer they both considered was not comforting. Perhaps because her brothers had already made their choice. On the 5th day, a surveyor arrived with 2 laborers and red stakes. Clara met them at the gate. The surveyor produced a county order authorizing structural assessment. This time, the seal was proper. She allowed them into the courtyard but refused access to the kitchen until they showed the exact scope of inspection. The surveyor, Mr. Creel, was a narrow man whose coat smelled of tobacco and damp paper. He studied the western wall for less than a minute, struck 3 stones with a small hammer, and declared the mortar unsound. Jonah asked why he had not inspected the foundations. Creel replied that collapse above made inspection below unnecessary. While Clara argued with him, One laborer slipped into the kitchen. She heard the scrape of metal and ran inside. He had wedged a crowbar under the 7th floor panel. Clara seized the bar with both hands. The laborer shoved her backward. Jonah crossed the room in 3 strides and put the man against the wall without striking him. The second laborer fled. Creel protested that they were following orders. Whose orders? Clara demanded. Creel gathered his papers. The county's. Then why did your man go directly to one stone in a room he had never entered? Creel's face changed. He left without answering. Under the lifted edge of the floor panel, Clara found a thin wire stretched across the step. If the stone had been pried up quickly, the wire would have snapped and released a rusted weight above the stairwell. The weight was connected to a masonry pin. Remove the pin, and part of the arched ceiling would collapse onto anyone below. Someone had installed the trap recently. The wire was new. They do not want the chamber opened, Jonah said. They want it destroyed in a way that looks like the house falling. That night, Clara wrote a full account and sent it with a farm boy to Mr. Penn. She also wrote to the county magistrate requesting a delay of demolition until the waterworks could be examined. The next morning, both letters were returned unopened. A notice pinned to the lane post declared the western road temporarily closed due to instability. No carts were permitted. Adrian owned the land on both sides of the lower lane. He had placed men there to turn away deliveries. Clara began to understand the shape of the battle. Her brothers did not need to prove the manor worthless. They needed only to prevent her from proving otherwise for 21 days. She counted what she possessed: 1 loaf, half a cheese, 6 candles, a hammer, a saw with 3 missing teeth, Jonah's shovel, and the house itself. Then she began using what the house provided. The broken eastern wing yielded sound oak beneath rotten surface boards. The old laundry held a copper tank that could be patched into a stove. Iron hooks from the stable became roof fasteners. Slate fallen into the courtyard could be trimmed and reset. Jonah showed her how to brace a cracked beam with 2 shorter timbers under opposing pressure. Clara kept lists, measured every span, and worked until her hands blistered, hardened, and split again. At sunset on the 7th day, smoke rose properly from one chimney. 2 rooms were dry. The kitchen floor remained untouched. Villagers watched from the lower ridge. Some still believed Adrian's warnings. Others had begun to wonder why a worthless house required guards, surveyors, road closures, and fire. The first person to cross the blockade was not a friend. It was Miriam Cole, owner of the village bakery, carrying a sack of flour on her back. She was 50, square-shouldered, and angry at nearly everyone. Adrian's men told her the road was closed. Miriam walked through the ditch instead, reached Blackthorn covered in mud, and dropped the sack on Clara's table. "I am not giving you flour," she said. "I am storing it somewhere your brother cannot count it." Clara understood. The next day, the blacksmith sent 6 bolts for storage. A widow from the southern cottages sent dried beans. A shepherd brought lamp tallow. None called it help. Each claimed Blackthorn was merely the safest place for goods they did not want Adrian to tax or inventory. By the 10th day, the West Hall held enough provisions for a month. Rumor changed direction. People began speaking of the manor not as a poisoned ruin, but as a place beyond Adrian's reach. That made him more dangerous. He came after dark with no wagon, no brother, and no witnesses. Clara found him in the library, standing before the penciled flow records. He had entered through a window in the east wing. "You should have taken the room at Matthews," he said. "You should have let the county finish this." Clara held a lamp between them. "Did you order the fire?" "No." "Did Matthew?" Adrian's jaw shifted. "You think in childish lines. Guilty or innocent? Love or cruelty? This valley has survived because some of us accepted necessary costs. 17 years ago, the North Spring weakened. Father had to choose where the remaining water went. The family farms fed 300 people. Blackthorn's orchard fed no one. So you closed its gate. We redirected the flow. The orchard died, but Ashcombe lived. And the village wells, Adrian looked away for the first time. The levels fell more than expected. Yet you kept the gate closed. We could not reopen it without losing pressure to the farms. By then, contracts had been signed. Men had borrowed against harvests. Father understood. His note says he meant to reverse it. Father spent his final years regretting every decision that had kept us solvent. Regret is a luxury purchased by success. Clara moved closer. Why demolish the house? Adrian's eyes returned to hers. Because the old network cannot be controlled safely. Because if you turn the wrong gate, you could flood the valley. Because documents hidden under this roof could destroy every holding Father spent his life preserving. There it was. Not concern for her safety, not even fear of water. Fear of documents. What documents? Clara asked. Adrian gave a tired smile. The kind men bury when keeping them would make honesty too expensive. He stepped toward the door. Clara blocked him. He could have pushed her aside. Instead, he spoke softly. You believe Father chose you because you were kinder than we were. He chose you because he was too ashamed to confess to the sons who helped him. That sentence struck harder than Clara expected. Adrian saw it. He left through the broken window. For a long time she stood beside the penciled line. I did not reverse it. She had wanted the inheritance to mean her father had seen her. Adrian had offered another possibility, that Elias Vale had used her as a final hiding place for his guilt. Near dawn, Clara returned to the gate chamber. She turned the brass wheel back to its original mark and listened. The hidden metal answered. She pressed her ear to the wall. Water moved beyond it in several directions. But one current sounded weaker. She traced the sound to the floor and found a narrow groove shaped like the brass key. When she laid the key into it, the central flagstone shifted. Beneath was a shallow drawer containing a small ivory handle and a page torn from a technical ledger. The page listed gate positions and consequences. Position 1, North Spring to Orchard. Position 4, Archer to Village. Position 7, Emergency Relief to East Ravine. Position 12, Full Common Flow. Across Position 12, someone had written in red ink, Never open while Quarry Dam is loaded. Clara read the line aloud. Jonah, who had joined her at dawn, went very still. What quarry dam? She asked. He took the page. There was no quarry when this system was built. Matthew began cutting stone from the eastern ridge 8 years ago. He built a holding lake above the cut to wash gravel. If the old relief channel runs beneath that dam, full flow could undermine it. Then Adrian was right. Turning the wrong gate could flood the valley. Jonah shook his head. He was right about danger. That does not make him right about secrecy. They needed the rest of the ledger. According to the map, the star-shaped control chamber lay behind the brick wall. But no door was visible. Clara searched the kitchen above and found that the numbered studs could be pressed in combinations. The 7th opened the stair. What would the others open? Her father's line said not to break the floor. Not never to use it. She examined wear on the studs. 7, 12, 4, and 1 were brighter than the others. Water common guardianship. She pressed 1, 4, 7, 12. Nothing. She tried 12, 7, 4, 1. Deep beneath them, a lock released with a sound like a bell struck underwater. In the chamber below, the brick wall rotated inward around a central pivot. Behind it was a circular room filled with machinery. Bronze arms radiated from a stone column in the center. Each arm ended in a numbered gate lever. Glass tubes, many cracked, climbed the walls. On a shelf lay a black ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Clara reached it first. The opening pages recorded spring levels for 86 years. Later pages contained signatures of every Blackthorn custodian and representatives from 12 village households. The water was held in trust. No owner could sell it, divert it permanently, or deny a household enough for drinking and crops. Violation transferred the responsible owner's attached lands to the common trust. Near the final pages appeared her father's name, Adrian's, and Matthew's. 17 years ago, all three had signed a temporary diversion for 12 months. No renewal followed. Yet another document had been folded into the back cover, a private contract between the Vale brothers and Harrow Stone Company, selling guaranteed water from the North Spring for 25 years. It was dated 2 years earlier. Elias Vale's signature appeared at the bottom. Clara stared at it. Jonah studied the ink. Your father could barely sign his name 2 years ago. I witnessed him make a mark on the canal pension papers. This is too steady. Forged. Likely. But Adrian and Matthew signed in their own hands. The contract explained everything. Blackthorn had to be demolished because any inspection could reveal the common water covenant and the illegal diversion. Clara closed the ledger. At that moment, the house shook. A crash sounded from the kitchen. Jonah extinguished one lantern. They climbed into the stairwell and saw smoke rolling under the floor panel. This fire was inside the house. Someone had thrown burning oil through the library window. Flames climbed the old shelves where the penciled records were written. Jonah ran to the courtyard pump, while Clara dragged wet sacks from the first fire. They fought until the ceiling blackened and the western shelves collapsed. The room survived. But the wall records vanished under soot and broken plaster. Worse. When Clara returned to the control chamber, the black ledger was gone. In the confusion, someone else had entered through the lower passage. On the floor lay a single cuff button stamped with the letter M. Matthew arrived the next morning wearing the matching cuff. He made no attempt to hide it. A county constable and Mr. Bell accompanied him, along with Dr. Sayer, the district health officer. Matthew stood in the courtyard while Dr. Sayer collected water from the foundation seep. We received a report that you have disturbed an abandoned water system, Matthew said. 3 households below the ridge became ill last night. Clara held up the cuff button. You entered my house during the fire. Matthew glanced at it. Many men own silver buttons. Not with your initials. Mine are, v. That is only M. He smiled. A small distinction. But the law often lives inside small distinctions. Dr. Sayer sealed the water sample. Until testing is complete, he said. The manor and all springs connected to it are under quarantine. No water may be drawn, redirected, or distributed. Matthew looked toward the kitchen. The demolition date remains, he added. 9 days. After they left, Miriam arrived with news that Adrian had closed the public pump near the chapel, claiming possible contamination. Families now had to buy his carted river water. The sick households had all purchased water from the same Vale barrel. Not from Blackthorn. Clara saw the strategy immediately. Her brothers had poisoned or fouled their own delivery, blamed Blackthorn, and created a public reason to destroy the system. Without the ledger, she could prove little. Mr. Penn finally answered her messages on the 12th day. He came on foot after Adrian's men refused his carriage passage. His shoes were ruined, and his face carried the strained look of a man who had spent too long choosing professional caution over personal courage. Clara showed him the control room, the remaining map, the forged contract page she had copied before the ledger vanished, and the demolition application. Mr. Penn listened without interrupting. When she finished, he removed his spectacles. I drafted your father's will, he said. I also witnessed the temporary diversion 17 years ago. I believed the village representatives had approved it. They had not. Their names were copied from an older covenant. Did you know? Not then. I suspected later. Your father asked me to prepare a correction. Each time, he delayed signing. When his illness worsened, Adrian began attending every meeting. Your father became frightened of his own sons, and I became frightened of losing the Vale account. Clara looked at him. So everyone was frightened, and the village lost its water. Mr. Penn accepted the judgment. Yes. Can you testify that the Harrow contract bears a false signature? I can testify that I doubt it. Doubt is not proof. He opened his case and took out a sealed packet. Your father gave me this 4 months ago, with instructions to deliver it only if Blackthorn's kitchen floor was opened before demolition. I did not know whether that condition had been met. You could have asked. I should have. Clara broke the seal. Inside was a letter in Elias Vale's unsteady late hand and a small iron token shaped like a leaf. The letter began, Clara. I chose the word burden deliberately. Blackthorn does not belong to the person whose name stands on the deed. It belongs to whoever accepts responsibility when ownership offers no reward. I failed that test. Adrian believes survival excuses every theft made in its name. Matthew believes a thing is lawful if no one powerful objects. I taught them both by my example. Do not mistake this house for an apology. An apology asks the wounded person to make the guilty comfortable. Blackthorn is evidence, and it is a choice I was too cowardly to make while living. The missing covenant is not the only record. The house keeps 2 accounts. One is written by men. The other is written by the water itself, where winter blooms beneath stone. Use the leaf. Clara read the final lines alone. I do not ask you to save my name. Save only what should outlive it. She folded the letter. Mr. Penn asked what the leaf opened. Clara did not know. Jonah did. The old hot bed. He said, every great winter orchard once had a forcing house. A glass room warmed from beneath to produce fruit out of season. Blackthorn's glass house had collapsed behind the eastern wall. They spent the afternoon clearing bramble and broken frames. Beneath the ruin, they found long brick planting beds packed with dry soil. One bed differed from the others. Carved leaves formed a border around its base. Clara inserted the iron token into a matching recess. A brick panel opened, revealing a narrow tunnel sloping under the orchard. Warm air rose from below. They followed it by lantern. The tunnel ran beside a natural spring channel. Mineral deposits marked water levels along the wall in pale bands. At intervals, stone gauges had been set into the channel, each with dates and measurements carved directly into the surface. This was the water's second account. Permanent and impossible to remove without destroying the tunnel, the levels showed the North Spring had never weakened 17 years earlier. Its flow had remained steady. The claim used to justify the original diversion was false. Farther on, the tunnel divided. One branch went toward the village. It had been blocked by a masonry plug bearing the Vale crest. The mortar was 17 years old. Another branch ran toward the quarry. Its gate hardware was recent and stamped Harrow stone. Jonah lifted his lantern. There is your evidence, he said. Clara found more. On a dry ledge, workers had left empty blasting powder crates, invoices, and maintenance tags. One tag recorded weekly pressure readings, signed by Matthew Vale. The quarry had been drawing from the spring for years. Near the branch gate, water hammered behind a metal plate that had begun to bow. The old relief channel must be under pressure. Jonah said, the holding lake above the quarry is feeding back into it. If the spring rises or heavy rain comes, this plate will fail. What happens then depends which wall goes first. The village branch could burst. The manor foundations could lift. Or the quarry dam could slide. They copied every inscription and carried out the maintenance tags. Mr. Penn took statements from Jonah and Miriam. Clara sent a petition to Magistrate Holcomb in the county seat. This time through a railway clerk who owed Adrian nothing. A hearing was set for the morning before demolition. The weather changed that same evening. Clouds massed over the northern ridge, dark and low. Jonah studied them from the orchard wall. 3 days, he said, perhaps less. The rain did not begin at once. Unseasonable heat pressed over the valley. The dead-looking trees in the 7th row swelled at their buds. Clara opened the smallest orchard gate according to the torn instruction page, allowing a thread of spring water into one clay line. By dawn, drops stood on the bark of 12 trees. By noon, one bud opened into a white flower. It was small, imperfect, and months out of season. Villagers came to see it. They stood around the tree without speaking. For 17 years they had been told the winter ground was diseased. Now a single measure of water had made it bloom. Adrian arrived while they were there. His gaze moved from the flower to the gathered villagers and understood the danger more clearly than if Clara had raised a weapon. "This display proves nothing," he said. Miriam replied. "It proves the tree was thirsty." A shepherd added, "Like our wells." Adrian ordered everyone off private property. Clara stepped between him and the tree. "It is my property. For 8 more days," he said. "For as long as the law allows evidence to stand." Adrian came close enough that only she heard his answer. "The law will not stand when the east ridge comes down." Clara looked at him. He regretted the words immediately. "What have you done at the ridge?" she asked. He walked away. The first rain struck before midnight. It came in large, widely spaced drops, each darkening the courtyard stone. Within an hour, water poured from the gutters and through every gap in the eastern roof. The manor groaned as dry timbers swelled. Beneath the kitchen, the gate chamber filled with the sound of accelerating flow. Jonah and Clara pecked the metal arms. The glass tube marked Q, likely quarry, rose from half to 3/4. By dawn it had reached the red line. Jonah wanted to open the emergency relief gate to the east ravine, but the torn instruction warned against doing so while the quarry dam was loaded. "We need the full engineering record," he said. "The Black Ledger may explain the sequence. Matthew has it. Then we take it back." Clara did not go to Ashcombe or Matthew's mill. She went to the county hearing, carrying her father's letter. The tunnel rubbings, quarry tags, the forged contract copy, and a jar of water collected directly from the North Spring. The hearing filled the assembly room above the market hall. Rain struck the roof so hard, the magistrate repeatedly asked witnesses to speak louder. Adrian sat with 2 barristers. Matthew sat beside Dr. Sayer. Harrow Stone had sent a representative who claimed the company purchased water in good faith. The first hours went badly for Clara. Adrian's barrister argued that the tunnel inscriptions were unauthenticated. The maintenance tags could have been planted, and the covenant ledger did not exist. Dr. Sayer reported that the Blackthorn sample contained no poison, but he could not establish a connection between the Vale barrels and the sick households because the barrels had been emptied and scrubbed. Mr. Bell admitted the first survey had been incomplete, yet insisted the house remained unsafe. Then Adrian produced the Black Ledger. Clara almost stood. It lay on the barrister's table, cleaned and wrapped in fresh cloth. Adrian claimed it had been found among their father's effects at Ashcombe. Several pages had been removed. The remaining entries showed only that the family controlled private irrigation channels. The common water covenant was gone. Matthew had taken the pages that mattered. Magistrate Holcomb examined the book. "Without the original covenant," he said, "I cannot suspend a lawful demolition based solely on disputed copies and inscriptions." Mr. Penn rose to testify. He admitted his role in the false temporary diversion approval. Adrian's barrister destroyed his credibility in minutes. "You accepted fees from Elias Vale for 17 years. Yes. You suspected irregularity and said nothing. Yes. You now accuse the dead man and his sons only after his daughter threatened professional action. Clara made no such threat. Mr. Penn said. But the damage was done. The magistrate called Clara last. She stood at the front with rainwater dripping from the hem of her dress. Adrian watched her with an expression almost sorrowful. Clara did not defend her father's honor. She read his confession aloud. The room changed when she spoke the words, "I failed that test." People expected a daughter to polish a dead man's name. Clara placed the guilt where it belonged. Elias Vale had approved the first theft of water. Adrian had continued it. Matthew had sold it. Mr. Penn had hidden it. The village had suffered because respectable men found reasons to postpone the truth. Adrian's barrister objected that the letter was emotional, not legal evidence. Clara agreed. "It is not the evidence," she said. "It is the reason the evidence was left to me." She presented the stone gauge rubbings. Each gauge bore county survey marks used before the modern water board existed. Jonah testified to their authenticity from his canal service. A retired mason in the gallery recognized the Vale crest plug because his father had been paid to build it 17 years earlier and had forbidden him to speak. Miriam testified that Adrian's men closed the chapel pump before health results were known. 3 families testified that illness followed water purchased from the same cart. Doubt began to move across the room. Then the door opened. A quarry worker named Samuel Rusk entered, soaked to the skin, holding a red maintenance book. He had worked for Matthew for 6 years. The night before, Matthew had ordered him to open the quarry return gate and increase pressure toward Blackthorn. Samuel refused. Matthew dismissed him and threatened his family. The red book contained daily flow records and payments to county officials. It also contained a map of blasting charges placed along the old relief tunnel. Harrow Stone had planned to collapse the tunnel immediately after demolition, burying the evidence permanently. Matthew rose and called the man a thief. Samuel looked at him and said, "I stole the book. You stole the water." Magistrate Holcomb suspended the demolition and ordered the Vale brothers' accounts and quarry operations seized pending investigation. A murmur swept the gallery. Clara did not feel victory. Jonah had crossed to the window. Beyond the rain-streaked glass, the northern sky had turned the color of iron. He pointed toward the ridge. A line of muddy water was moving down the quarry road. "The dam is overtopping," he said. Samuel went pale. "It cannot. We lowered it yesterday. You increased return pressure into a blocked channel." Jonah replied. The water had nowhere to go. A bell began ringing in the street below. Not the church bell, but the rapid iron alarm used for fire or flood. The hearing dissolved. People ran for carts and horses. Magistrate Holcomb ordered the constables to evacuate the lower village. Clara seized the red maintenance book. The final pages described the dam valves, but not Blackthorn's ancient controls. Matthew tried to leave by the rear stair. A constable caught him. Adrian remained where he was, staring toward the ridge. "How long?" Clara asked Jonah. 2 hours if the outer wall holds. Less if the quarry face slides. The main road to Blackthorn was already flooding. They took Samuel's work wagon along the higher sheep track. Adrian demanded to come. He knew the alterations made near the quarry. Clara wanted to refuse. But there was no time for moral purity. They rode through rain so heavy the horse could barely see. At Blackthorn, water covered the lower orchard. The newly opened white bloom had been torn from the 7th tree. Inside the kitchen, the numbered brass studs vibrated underfoot. The gate chamber wall had begun to leak in 6 places. The glass quarry tube was full to its brass cap. Jonah opened the red book beside the control column. "Harrow's return gate feeds the old eastern relief," he said. "The original warning says never open full common flow while the dam is loaded, because pressure will rebound beneath the manor. We need to unload the dam first." Samuel said the quarry's lower sluice could release into the east ravine, but blasting debris had jammed it. The only remaining route was Blackthorn's village channel, blocked by the Vale masonry plug. If they broke the plug, Water could pass safely through the old stream bed below the southern fields, but the pressure behind it might destroy the tunnel and part of the manor. Clara asked how much of the house. Jonah looked upward as another tremor shook dust from the arch. The east wing. Perhaps the kitchen. Perhaps all of it, Adrian said. Then we wait for the county engineers. Samuel stared at him. There is no road left for engineers. Adrian turned on Clara. You cannot destroy the estate based on Pike's guess. Clara almost laughed. For 21 days, he had fought to demolish it. Now that the house could save the valley, he wanted it preserved. He did not want the house. She realized he wanted control over what was sacrificed and who received credit. The brass leaf token still hung on a cord around her neck. She placed it in the control column's central slot. The stone face opened, revealing a smaller wheel and a sentence engraved around it in English. The custodian shall lose the house before the village loses the water. Below the words were 12 shallow impressions for household seals. The covenant had never been merely legal. The machinery itself had been built around the obligation. Clara turned to Adrian. Father did not choose me because I was kinder, she said. He chose me because he knew you would always ask what the house was worth before asking whom it could save. She ordered Jonah to prepare Gate 4. The village channel. Samuel took 2 men to the orchard tunnel with hammers and charges from the quarry wagon. Not to blast the plug, but to crack its mortar in controlled sections. Adrian blocked the stair. As executor of the Vale Holdings, I forbid this. Clara held up the brass key. You are not executor here. He grabbed her arm. For one instant, they stood, as they had in childhood. Elder brother, certain, his strength settled every argument. Then Mr. Penn entered the kitchen with Magistrate Holcomb and 2 constables behind him. The magistrate removed Adrian's hand from Clara's arm. By emergency authority, he said, Miss Vale is appointed temporary custodian of the Blackthorn Waterworks. Interfere again, and I will have you restrained. Adrian stepped back. Clara descended. The first hammer blows sounded through the village tunnel. Water sprayed from the plug in thin, heart jets. Jonah set Gate 4 halfway. The bronze arm shook violently. Above them, bells began ringing inside the walls of the manor. Not alarms added by recent hands, but old brass bells connected to pressure floats throughout the network. One rang beneath the orchard, another beneath the mill branch, then a third somewhere in the eastern wing. The house was announcing the rising water. Samuel shouted from the tunnel that the plug was cracking unevenly. If it burst at once, the men would be killed. Clara studied the control marks. The torn instruction page gave positions but not timing. The water's account did. On the stone gauge rubbings, each high-flow year showed a sequence of carved leaves. 1, 7, 4, 12. The same pattern that had opened the chamber, but perhaps also the safe release order. North Spring. Emergency balance. Village. Common flow. Clara moved Gate 1 a quarter turn. Pressure dropped in the orchard tube and rose in the north bypass. Gate 7 released with a scream of metal. Water surged toward the east ravine. Enough to lower pressure, but not enough to undermine the dam. Jonah opened Gate 4 another measure. The village plug split along the mortar seam. Samuel and the workers ran. A wall of clear water burst through and raced down the old channel. For a few seconds, every tube on the control wall fell below red. Then the quarry tube climbed again. Faster. Samuel looked at the red book. The dam face has gone, he said. The entire holding lake is in the return channel. Jonah pointed to Gate 12. Full common flow would spread the surge across every branch, including the farms, village, orchard, and mill run. It could save the lower houses. But the manor sat directly above the distribution star. The foundations would take the first impact. Clara heard stone break overhead. The kitchen floor shifted. Adrian, still at the stair, shouted for them to leave. Jonah said, "If you open 12, you may have less than a minute." Clara looked around the circular chamber. Her father had hidden his guilt there. Her brothers had tried to destroy it. She had slept beneath its broken roof, mended its windows, and believed for a few brief days that the house might become the first thing in her life no one could take away. Now, the covenant demanded that she give it up herself. Ownership, she understood, was not proven by how tightly a person held a thing. Sometimes it was proven by knowing when to open the hand. She wrapped both hands around gate 12. "Open the upper doors," she told Jonah. "Get everyone out." He did not argue. When the chamber emptied, Clara turned the wheel. It moved slowly, each inch releasing a deeper roar. At halfway, water punched through the east wall. At 3/4, the floor tilted. She forced the wheel to the final mark. The bronze arms snapped outward. Every bell in Blackthorn Manor rang at once. Water exploded through the distribution channels. Clara was thrown against the central column. The lantern went out. In darkness, the house seemed to lift, pause, and break. Someone caught the back of her coat. Jonah had returned. Together they climbed the stair as the chamber filled below them. The kitchen floor buckled into waves. They crossed just before the 7th panel disappeared, under white water. Outside, the eastern wing collapsed with a sound that swallowed the storm. Stone, timber, and slate fell into the courtyard. A torrent tore through the dead orchard channels, dividing cleanly at every 7th row. The old clay pipes burst upward, pouring water around the roots. Clara and Jonah reached the western wall as the central chimney came down behind them. Villagers on the ridge screamed for them to run. They climbed through the broken gate. Seconds later, the kitchen roof folded inward. Blackthorn Manor did not vanish. The west block remained, scarred and leaning. The east half became a field of stone under rushing water. Across the valley, the flood spread through ancient channels that had been dry for 17 years. It filled the chapel pond, crossed the mill meadow, and entered the old stream bed below the southern cottages. Instead of one wall of water striking the village, 12 smaller rivers carried it around and through the fields. The quarry dam failed before sunset. Mud and stone thundered down the eastern ravine. But the main surge had already been drawn away. No house was swept from its foundation. No person drowned. Ashcomb's lower wheat field disappeared under brown water. Matthew's mill yard flooded to the windows. The village pumps overflowed clear for the first time in years. Blackthorn Manor lost half its body and kept the valley alive. The investigation lasted through winter. Matthew was convicted of fraud, unlawful diversion, and ordering the destruction of public waterworks. Adrian avoided prison by surrendering the Vale lands named in the covenant. But he lost Ashcombe and every contract built on stolen water. Clara did not take those lands for herself. She placed them in a valley trust, exactly as the old agreement required. Mr. Penn left private practice and helped repair the records he had obscured. Jonah became keeper of the restored channels. By spring, Blackthorn's west wing had a new roof, while the fallen eastern stones remained around the rebuilt kitchen as a warning. Beneath a glass panel in the floor, water divided toward the valley homes. The orchard bloomed in a white wave from the 7th row outward. Some trees were too damaged to recover. Clara replaced them with young stock grown from living cuttings found in the oldest trunks. On the first harvest morning, villagers carried baskets through the repaired gate. Clara stood beneath the tree that had produced the first impossible flower. In her pocket was her father's final letter, worn soft at the folds. She had never saved his name, just as he had asked. She had done something harder. She had allowed the truth to remain whole. When Adrian came once to the edge of the orchard, she did not send him away. and she did not invite him inside. He looked at the running channels and said, "I thought losing the farms would end us." Clara answered, "It ended what we were doing. That is not the same thing." He left without asking forgiveness. Years later, people said Clara Vale inherited Blackthorn Manor and discovered water beneath it. They were wrong. The water had always spoken beneath the floors and under every dry field. What had been buried was the courage to listen. The ruined house her brothers called worthless became the one place whose value could never again be measured by what one family kept.